Hello, hello, and welcome once again to the David Messiah YouTube channel, where our watchwords are to teach and to build back up the kingdom of Zion. The title of this presentation is Prophecy Fulfilled as to the laying of the siege of Zion upon Babylon, the laying of the siege of Zion upon Babylon. And it arose in the context of the very first upload that was made to this David Messiah YouTube channel, where was given the demand letter upon the Roman Catholic Church and the State of Israel, the demand upon the Vatican and Israel, to which was attached a 1 hour and a half long audio letter containing that demand. And that was just about a year ago now. And in the course of that, I was guided to remind the listener that it was on the 10th day of the 10th month, actually year 606 BC, that Babylon laid siege upon Jerusalem. The forces of Nebuchadnezzar had laid siege upon Jerusalem. And I was guided that as of the 10th day of the 10th month, year 6007 on the Most High's calendar, the reverse had occurred, or had occurred, because that upload was made in March of 2022. So at that time, it was referring to an event that took place a couple of months prior, on December 31st, 2021, which corresponded to the 10th day of the 10th month, exactly 2625 years earlier, when Babylon laid siege upon Zion, upon Jerusalem, and that the Most High had indeed sort of reversed that by laying siege by having Zion lay siege upon Babylon. But at the time that I was given to make that statement, I was not fully sort of cognizant of all its implications, although I did have this idea that the king of the south is Russia, which indeed was addressed in a chapter of the book The Coming of David Messiah. But what was transpiring at the time, if you recall, Russia invaded Ukraine on February 24th, 2022. So that was only about a week prior to my making that audio letter demand upon the Vatican and upon Israel. And I hadn't been sort of minded to link it so tightly to what was happening there in Ukraine. But what I am being now guided to indicate is that in accordance indeed with this other upload, the King of the South is Russia, which was 11 months ago. So it was only about a month after that audio letter demand that this one was uploaded. But it was also there, the ideas were also present in the book The Coming of David Messiah. This idea that Russia, at least in its origins, was an Israelite nation. And the Most High let me know through Urim that still today, the paternal seed line that is most prevalent in the Russian Federation is indeed the seed line of Israel. It's only about 30% or 1/3 or so, but it's a plurality. So that in effect the sort of ruling spirit or the guiding spirit that the Most High has put upon Russia is that of Israel. which to many of our people, we kind of don't want to accept that maybe there's some white folk on the planet today who are Israel. But indeed, that is true. Um, and so the Most High is using Russia as an instrument. I well remember having, well, let me finish the statement and the thought, is using Russia as that instrument which is to bring destruction upon Esau in accordance with the book of Obadiah. But let me bring it up. The book of Obadiah, chapter 1, verse 18. I can kind of try to do it off the top of my head, but let me bring it up so that the reference is clear. And have a little sort of patience with me. Obadiah 1. Okay, here we are. And the house of Jacob shall be a fire, and the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esau for stubble, and they shall kindle in them and devour them, and there shall not be any remaining of the house of Esau, for Yahweh hath spoken it. So, the house of Jacob is Israel, okay, in both the large and in the sort of narrow references. The 10 northern tribes are Israel in the narrow reference, and the house of Jacob is all Israel in the broader reference. But he narrows it here in any case. And the house of Joseph became the leading house or the ruling house of the northern tribes under Ephraim, who was the second son of Joseph. So this is who Russia is. Rasha. The king with the sharp teeth is what Rasha in the Paleo-Hebrew means. So the Most High has given Rasha those sharp teeth and the means and the power to bring this destruction upon the house of Esau. And the house of Esau in other uploads, the Most High has guided me to identify with Gog and Magog. Gog and Magog being sort of in using their own tongue-in-cheek sort of what's the word I'm looking for? The city of London, the house of Rothschilds, the financial power, that great whore that sitteth upon the beast, all those sort of images, that sort of imagery is identified with, here it is, Gog and Magog defined. And this is a picture here taken in the city of London. That's 1 square mile area within the larger metropolitan London. And in this small 1 mile square area, even the Queen cannot go in there. Well, now the King Charles cannot go in there without permission. Every year they hold a little ritual where they drag out these two statues. One is that is by their own tongue. One is called Gog and the other one is called Magog. So they are self-identifying who they are ultimately. It's a much larger sort of, detailed analysis to get to that. But they are both Gog and Magog. In effect, Magog is identified in Scripture as that essentially as that king of the north. But the term itself, Gog and Magog, is not defined in Scripture. So the point of Okay, I'm sorry, my laptop, not laptop, my cell phone here seems to be a little bit overloaded. So please bear with me. If this is a little bit too much to bear, then I'll simply redo this. But I'll carry on for the minute. Yes. So ultimately, Gog and Magog is identified as US, UK, NATO force projection, with the ultimate rulers being the HOR, which riding atop that beast, that dragon, that red dragon with the 7 heads and the 10 horns. So they're the ones sort of, in charge of what we now call the collective West. And as opposed to that power is that the king of the South, who is Russia, and who even in the terminology that is now being used in the world, in a sense, is representing the global South. Okay, so with that being understood, we now must go back to the further prophecy, which is tied in with Obadiah chapter 1 verse 18, which I've just sort of now given, that further prophecy having to do specifically with what was referred to in that audio letter demand upon the Vatican and upon the state of Israel, where I was guided to make a particular reference to Revelation chapter 19, verse 18. And this was the prophecy about, and let me bring it up here now. Which is that prophecy about the great feast. And here it is. I started verse 18. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great God, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, small and great. So this great supper is now identified with what they even using the term meat grinder, kind of attrition war, that is going on there now in Ukraine, with Russia being the instrument bringing that meat grinder destruction upon the armies of NATO, because Ukraine is being used as a sort of a battering ram, to use Putin's phrase, to war against Russia. And so what also applies is that the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 39, verses about 17 to 18, which is parallel to Revelation chapter 19, verse 18, which I've just read. And here in Ezekiel chapter 39, it says at verse 17, and thou, son of man, thus saith Yahweh, speak unto every feathered fowl, unto every beast of the field, Assemble yourselves and come, gather yourselves on every side to my sacrifice that I do sacrifice for you, even a great sacrifice upon the mountains of Israel, that ye may eat flesh and drink blood. Ye shall eat the flesh of the mighty, and drink the blood of the princes of the earth, of rams, of lambs, of goats, and etc., and etc. So this is that great destruction. And it's tied in also with Obadiah chapter 1, verse 18, that is leading up to the destruction of Esau, which we have identified in particular with Gog and Magog, well, in general with Gog and Magog, which in particular includes the United States, who is that daughter of Babylon spoken of at Psalm 137. So at Ezekiel 39, at verse 1, starting at verse 1, we also see what is this going to be the sum of the matter, where it says, Therefore, thou son of man, prophesy against Gog, and that was that fallen angel, the actual father of that son Magog, nominally of Japheth, but really he was the son of this fallen angel Gog. And that's where that whole, infiltration of the Nephilim after the flood started over again. And say, Thus saith Yahweh, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal. And we could Tubal was one of the sons of Japheth also. And verse 2, And I will turn thee back, and leave but the sixth part of thee, and will cause thee to come up upon the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel. So you see here, what does the Most High say? I will cause thee to come up from the north part. So this is NATO and the North Atlantic, North America, and Northwestern Europe, and so forth, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel. Mountain here, the mountain means, in a metaphorical sense, the power of Israel, which is that idea that is also there in the word Armageddon, where the R, Armageddon, is Har Armageddedi, when you go to the Paleo-Hebrew, where Har literally means mountain, but also in a metaphorical sense means a horn or a power. Okay? So the Israelite power that they have been caused by the Most High to attack, because they provoked and provoked and provoked Russia. Russia is, in this sense, an Israelite power. And NATO had made the promise back in 1991, when the Warsaw Pact was wound up, dissolved. NATO ought to have dissolved at the same time, but they did not. But they made a promise to President Gorbachev, of the last president of the Soviet Union, before it fell apart, that they would not move another inch eastward. And of course they lied. They also lied, in all the 300-odd treaties they made with the Aboriginal peoples of the land here in the West, North America in particular. They made all those treaties and broke every one. So they broke that treaty again. It was actually written down, but not in sort of ironclad legal language. But it was there in the aid memoirs and memoranda of meetings and so forth that were documented at the time with what was his name, the then Secretary of State of the United States. Anyway. But verse 3 here, and I will smite thy bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of thy right hand. Which means that all the power that they think they have, in fact, they don't. And this is why they when you look at the commentaries by the professional soldiers such as Scott Ritter and Douglas McGregor, backed up with factual sort of evidence and sources, that they're going to run out of munitions. They cannot fight the fight against Russia because the rate at which they have to use up just artillery ammunition is not sufficient to keep up with the rate at which the Russians are doing it. So as Scott Ritter says, if you're in a fight, the guy that runs out of ammunition is going to lose. And so that is where we are, prophetically. But along the way, this huge destruction that has taken place there in Ukraine, they're saying Ukraine has lost over 200,000 killed. At one time, I'd also given an earlier upload where I was moved to say, a short one, where I was moved to say that, let me not chance bringing up another one here, but where I was moved to say that the prophecy of Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 2 was fulfilled at the point where Ukraine had lost about 600,000 casualties, killed and wounded, and no longer able to continue in battle. Okay, so that was a sort of a literal fulfillment of Ezekiel chapter 39 verse 2, because 1/6 part how did it go? I have it right here. And I will turn thee back and leave but the 6th part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts. Yes, so Ukraine had started with an army of about 600,000, of which the casualty count of killed and wounded had amounted to about 500,000. So only a 6th part was left. And to sort of replace and to keep the fight going, NATO had to, in effect, introduce into the theater there NATO troops, even though they put on Ukrainian uniforms, Poles and mercenaries, in effect, from Britain and the United States and Romania and Georgia and elsewhere. And also give them all weapons, the M777s and the HIMARS and the this and the that and the other. And now they're dwindling, they can't even supply tanks sufficient to be any kind of threat to the defeat that's staring them in the face. And they're talking about fighter jets, and of course, having to face up to the fact that fighter jets would be of no avail because it takes months to train pilots to fly those things. So by the time they can get the pilots, well enough trained, the war would have been over. So that NATO is facing this defeat. And I will turn thee back and leave but the 6th part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel against this Israelite power, which is Russia, the king of the south. And I will smite thy bow out of thy left hand, and will cause thine arrows to fall out of thy right hand. So in effect, they're impotent with all the power that they have. They are nuclear. NATO and the United States and other members of NATO are nuclear powers. But those nuclear weapons that they have, unless they decide to go nuclear, which is very possible, but even if they go nuclear, they're going to lose, because this is what the prophecy says. And we now have every indication that if it were a nuclear exchange, well, the best sort of calculation that we could make is that then everybody on the planet would be dead, some of us may last longer than others, but in effect, but that is not going to happen because we are at the head of the seventh millennium prophesied, a millennium of peace, where the spears will be beaten down into plowshares and the swords beaten down in, well, was it spears into pruning hooks and swords into plowshares and etc. So there is going to be peace, which means to say that even if there is some nuclear exchange, it would be of a limited sort, where it's very possible, in the sense of verse 3 here, that the NATO countries will not be able to even get off their weapons. You understand? But in any case, Russia seems to have an advantage in that regard because they now have developed these hypersonic missiles. Was it the Samat and the I forget all the nomenclature of the different kinds of weapons that they have. But regarding which evidently the Americans have no counter. Okay, and they sort of hypersonic and etc. and etc. So Russia is that sort of Israelite power that answers to prophecy here in Ezekiel concerning the king of the south. So this is the point I wanted to make, that this prophecy now is being fulfilled, and it is what I've been guided to talk about in that audio letter of demand upon the Catholic Church and this modern state of Israel. And they too are sort of, part of who Esau is, because Esau is there as part of these so-called Jews. And it's even there in the Jewish encyclopedia, where it says that Edom or Esau is part of modern Jewry, going back to the Pharisees. And the Edomites had also, taken control of that church that had been founded by Peter. So Esau is there everywhere, and Esau has had his dominion going back at least to, or somewhere, yes, going back to when Nebuchadnezzar laid siege at first to Jerusalem. Okay, so that is the main point I wanted to make here in this video presentation, and I also wanted to draw your attention to, because it's just about now the anniversary when that first audio letter of demand was guided to bring. But I wanted to draw your attention to the calendar that we're now in the spring of the new year coming. Where are we? Yes, so we're getting close to the new year 6009 on the Most High's calendar. The tail end the beginning of, well, here we are in 2023. Okay, so this is what the calendar looks like. So Friday, March 24th will be the first day of the new Enochian year 6009. So it's the first day of the first month, first day of spring, first day of the new year 6009. And this is a day for a new month feast. And corresponding to that, Passover will be 14 days. The 14th of that month is Thursday, April the 6th. That night going into Friday, April the 7th, which would be the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. Now, I am to again make the point to our people who still some of them, or some of us, still hew to this Jewish idea under which the new months are determined by the sighting of the crescent moon. This is how the Muslims do it, this is how the so-called Jews do it, and they're both wrong. Because how we must do it under the laws given to us through, in this case, Enoch, the Mosai's calendar, the annual layout of the calendar, does not at all require any reference whatsoever to the moon and the circuits of the moon. It is entirely a solar calendar. And it is how it is laid out, it is the sort of four empirical reference points in the calendar. The two equinoxes, spring equinox and fall equinox, and the two solstices, the summer solstice and the winter solstice. So right after the spring equinox, the day after that is the first day of the spring season, the first day of the new year. That is how that works out. And the day of the equinox has got nothing to do with the moon. And in Enoch's day, you counted then 91 days. This is how the cycle was the Mosai had set it up. You counted 91 days after that, and you got to the summer solstice, which was the longest sort of daylight day of the year. And the day after that was the first day of the new month, and also the first day of the new season, which would be summer. First day of the fourth month. So each season was exactly 3 months. Now you count another 91 days for summer season, and that brings you to the fall equinox. And the day after that started a new season, which was the season of fall. And you counted 91 days again, and that brought you back to brought you to the winter solstice. And the day after that began the season of winter. So that would be the first day of the 10th month. Count 91 days, that would bring you again to the spring equinox, and that would then be the end of that annual cycle. But in no instance was it ever necessary to look at the moon. Now, the Mosai made a change to that after the flood. Instead of the 364 days that was the case in Enoch's day, he changed it to 365 days. So he added an extra day, and the only way to find out where that extra day goes into the annual calendar is to prayerfully inquire, which as his servant, as his Nazirite servant, given the gift of Urim and Thummim, he allowed me to do, and he gave me an answer. And he let me to know that extra day went into the season of spring. So spring season today is no longer 91 days, but 92 days. And as to where it goes in the season of spring, he let me to know it became a 31st day of the second month. And then he made another change after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. And when you read Enoch and you read the book of Jubilees, you get an understanding of why these changes were even made. But I won't go into that here in this lecture. So after Sodom and Gomorrah, he added yet another day, which makes it a 366-day cycle, but only every fourth year. So that on average, the year became 365 and a quarter days. And on every fourth year, and he let me to know that how that is done is every fourth divisible year. That extra day was put into the fall season and became a 31st day of an 8th month. or the 31st day of the second month of the fall season. And that's but with those changes, the whole of what Enoch had given us essentially remained intact in the basic structure of the calendar, and it could be put to empirical test by referencing the four sort of empirical pillars of the annual calendar, which is the spring equinox day, the summer solstice day, the fall equinox day, and then the winter solstice day. Those four pillars mark the end of the current season and herald the beginning of the season that then follows. So that anybody today, even though it's now hallowed tradition amongst the so-called Jews, that requires the prior observation of the crescent moon to figure out when a new month would start, are simply wrong. And who am I to say that? I am that David Messiah. And I have been given the tools and the authority to say so. Okay, so this is the, he wanted me to say that, so that those who are gearing up now for the coming new year, and gearing up also for the coming Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread, this is the calendar that needs to be adhered to. Okay? All right, so what else is there? Oh yes, I also needed to for those who will go back to the that audio letter demand, I had made a mistake, and that mistake was in thinking that the dates for the fulfillment of Revelation chapter 19:18, which he had given me as being the Passover last year, I'd made the mistake of thinking that that would happen not alone in the spiritual, but also in the physical. And it was the same mistake I had made before, when he let me to know that the 144,000 would stand upon holy Mount Zion with the Lamb at their head. He let me to know that that would take place on the New Year's Day of year 6005 on his calendar, which was Sunday, March 24th, 2019. And that too, I made the mistake of thinking that that would happen in the physical. But he's corrected me, and somehow, for some reason, I seem to be kind of slow on the uptake with some of these things. I made the same mistake of thinking that Revelation 19:18, that great feast for the fowls of the air and so forth, would take place on it would have been April 5th last year, Passover, and into the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. But he let me to know later, when that did not happen, that you're making the same mistake again. It is done in the spiritual, but in the physical it is taking some time unfolding. Just as the gathering of the 144,000, it started or is done in the spiritual as of Sunday, March 24, 2019, the first day of the new year, 6005. But in the physical, some unfolding is required. And that process has been unfolding. Okay, so you can go back and listen to those to that audio letter, and in fact I made that sort of correction soon afterwards, when the new year, last year, New Year on the Most High's calendar year 6008, when that New Year occurred, and evidently, we hadn't had the Revelation 19:18 take place in the physical. Excuse me, is when he needed to again, correct me and remind me that it was the same when I made the mistake as to the gathering of the 144,000. And by the way, it is also there in the sealed portion, I think chapter either 21 verse 63 or 63 verse 21, where that point is made. So had I paid closer attention, I would not have made that mistake. Okay. So that is all what I wanted to say in this particular video presentation. And so with that, I give all praise, I give all glory, I give all exaltation unto the Most High, the Most High Yahweh, and to those of you still listening, I say, Shalom.